shutdowns are actually a bit more common than probably perceived. We've had 20 of these shutdowns. It's often just political brinksmanship.
I think is really simply a response to showing that they're willing to fight Trump.
The president's doing kabuki theater. He's threatening to fire a bunch of employees if we don't keep the government open.
Democrats are really trying to make this fight about health care, but Republicans are betting that they won't be successful, that people will just see Democrats as holding up a shutdown, potentially leading to a large-scale federal layoff. The fiscal year starts from October 1st and runs all the way until September 30th of next year. So every year on September 30th or around this time, there's a question whether or not the government is going to be funded.
We are going to give them every opportunity to vote for a clean CR.
For Republicans, it's a time to show that Democrats are blocking the way to keeping the government funded, trying to paint them as unreasonable.
We're spending about $7 trillion this year. Now, we're only talking about 25% of the budget, which is the discretionary spending. Obamacare is the root cause of all these problems. It is skyrocketing healthcare costs, insurance costs, and all Democrats want to do is throw more money at it. We want to bring down healthcare costs in a reasonable way.
Well, Democrats say the only way they are ever going to give Republicans the votes they need to keep the government open is through something on health care.
And what we know is that failure to extend those tax credits is going to see insurance costs rise for over 20 million people, and about 4 million people lose their health insurance entirely.
For the government to avoid a shutdown, you need 60 senators to vote for approving any sort of stopgap or funding bill. If you do the math, Republicans only have 53 Republican senators. That means they need at least 7 Democrats to join them. And frankly, because Rand Paul tends to vote no on these continuing funding bills, they're likely going to need 8 Democrats. Now, you have one already, John Fetterman, who has come out and said he doesn't think that a government shutdown is ever a good idea, that it ever helps people. And he has come out and supported the Republicans' legislation. But at this point, you don't have any other Democrats who have done so.
My guess is we probably will shut the government down.
This shutdown is a little bit different because we're seeing something that we've never seen before, which is the federal government not just saying that they will furlough federal employees, but they will actually fire and lay off federal employees who are considered non-essential. So the Office of Management and Budget, run by Russell Vought, came out with a memo to agencies just the other week saying, hey, as you furlough employees, consider whether or not you really need those roles and consider shrinking down your agencies so it's only essential employees, as well as programs and agencies that are in line with the president's agenda. Now, he didn't go into detail about exactly which agencies those would be, but we can guess based on what the priorities of the Trump administration have been. Probably means things like Customs and Border Protection, ICE, military, policing would all maintain funding levels and staff, or maybe things like, say, the Department of Education would be more at risk for cuts. Democrats have basically come out and said that this is nothing more than an intimidation tactic. They point out there have already been massive reductions in the federal workforce, and that Russell Vought doesn't need a government shutdown to ask agencies to lay off individuals. Meanwhile, you have seen the Supreme Court bring some initial rulings out that lay a path for the Trump administration to fire more workers. So there is more of a risk here if a shutdown does happen, because you could see a massive shrinkage in the size of government.
Those federal workers would be certainly impacted in a major way. If I look at the overall, economy, we're talking about 160 million people employed, over 160 million employed. And the federal workers, the ones that were potentially furloughed, is probably about 800,000. This big debate about the employment picture and inflation. And if we go into a government shutdown, some of that data releases, even the upcoming employment report, would potentially not come out. So all of a sudden you have the Fed heading into a meeting with less information, which is already, a difficult decision. I mean, I think what would happen is that the Fed would start looking even more on outside private data, but it certainly complicates things at a time where there's a lot of tension in the Fed's mandate and that employment versus the inflation side.
mean, obviously, it's a big deal for the government employees that are furloughed or fired, but from a broader economic perspective, not so much.
The economy tends to take a little bit of a short-term hit during the shutdown, and then there tends to be a rebound thereafter as well. So you're seeing the kind of the same picture play out in financial markets. When you look back historically, leading up, there tends to be a little bit of volatility, but during the actual shutdown, the market has actually been about flat.
When it comes to the FAA, airlines, you usually see longer lines for planes when a government shutdown is going on. The U.S. Travel Association estimated that during a shutdown, about $1 billion for the travel industry is lost a week. That's from flights, that's from rail, that's from people not visiting U.S. parks and national monuments, which are closed during a shutdown. Would it be smart for the government to avoid having to do shutdowns by automatically continuing funding when they get to this point? Probably. But much like the fiscal cliff and raising the debt ceiling, it takes away this key point of leverage that really forces lawmakers to sit down, come to the table, and hash out an agreement. Much like the debt ceiling and the debt limit, it's something that Congress is just going to continue to wrangle over year after year.